I am Dr. Richa Bora, an assistant professor from the Department of English, Jnana Vyas University, and I'm here today to present my vision on a cultural acumen on the indigenous perspectives in the folklore of Rajasthan. It's a holistic approach to the cultural ideas, and thereby it will be there to conjecture the cultural repositoriness of the folk tradition and the cultural beauty of Rajasthan to be encapsulated herewith. So I begin with a quote saying, humanities are generally regarded as broad-based disciplines which are concerned with learning or literature which focuses on human culture such as the arts, literature, classics, history, theater arts, languages, and linguistics, wherein it mitigates with the prime objective of exercising potently the social integration of the masses within the frame of social milieu and professing the cohesive advancement of the successful transmission of values, social norms, knowledge to the coming generation via the channel of orality tradition. Perusing with this broad vision to human aesthetics, the thought process furthermore adds, while contemplating the words of Toby Miller, who meditated on this parcel of cultural pedagogy of ideas as cultural studies is a tendency across disciplines rather than a discipline itself. It also talks about the comprehensive analysis of the forces within and outside, which imparts the socially organized conduct and behavior of the people to construct their lives with holistic pleasure and social fulfillment. Therewith, penetrated with this cultural milieu of sociological approach to literature, the present study seeks to unfold the curtains to the rich sands of Rajasthani culture and majesty known to the global world outside via the native expression of rich folklore, sung and narrated with the chivalry of princely estates and with the religiosity of the cultural deities like Ramdevji, Gogoji, Babuji, Mehaji, and Harbuji, who are reckoned to be the Panch Peer of Rajasthan. Theoretically, the purview of the study further alludes that cultural studies views culture not just as a fixed, bounded, stable, and discrete entity, but rather as constantly changing, interacting, and changing sets of processes and practices. Moreover, it says that it makes a sociological approach, and the study proceeds with the words of Edward Tyler, who referred to culture as a learned complex of knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, and custom, where again it is conjectured as a conscious creation of human rationality processed in the build of highly ordered humane reality. Besides, in the orbit of cultural anthropology, the term culture is comprehended at further three levels, counted with the substantial patterns of human behavior and the below conscious awareness of grammar and language syntax, of which the native language speaker himself is seldom aware of. Alongside this, the third segment is noted with the culturally determined patterns of thought and perception. Pertaining to the socio-cultural construct of the indigenous literature, the study develops with a vision to traverse through the rich and royal heritage of Rajasthan, which has often been called as the cultural capital of India. It is a beautifully woven cultural state which retains its divine rusticity and cultural simplicity in the chivalrous ethnicity of its tradition and historicity of India's glorious past. The state is nestled with the glories of the historic past, drawn and enlivened in the architectural legacy of the exotic monuments, palaces, expansive forts, which melodizes the music of the legendary past via the channels of the lively folk music, folk dance forms, and folk narratives, incorporating and embedding the kaleidoscopic frame of the genre called
Sorry to interrupt you. You have 1 minute left.
Yes, ma'am. I'll just speed up. Since the mid-19th century, folklore has been collectively applied to the expression of verbal expressions, compositions, and social rituals, which is transmitted from generation to generation, solely or at least primarily by the word of mouth, that is orally, in the celebration of culture and tradition. For the most part, it is called as the creation of primitive and illiterate people who philosophize with the eternal truth of life and existence, and therefore much of it is availed to us in oral tradition. Predominantly, it is embodied in the form of literature, which people assemble it together in context to its social cultural milieu, and then it is engraved on the manuscripts in order to preserve it, the legacy treasured so far as the geographical mappings are considered and the folks are very much very much emphasized in particular. But again, there comes a question that when it happens, it usually denotes and specifically signifies that it communicates or rather gives a strong signal that the folk literature in question is in decline. In Rajasthan, the folk literature is immensely rich, lively, and it exotically resonates. Yes, ma'am?
Your time is up.
Ma'am, I need two minutes more, please. I'll sum up my idea.
Richa, we will not be able to make it further. We have, as you see, so many scholars. Can you take your concluding lines?
I'll just sum it up. I just want a minute more, sir. So it says that pertaining to this folk literature of Rajasthan, I have quoted the popular folk song named as Kesariya Balam, which is originally sung by the folklorist Allah Jalai Bai, and she is awarded by the Padam Shri, and this is how she has resonated with the colors of Rajput bravery, sacrifice, and valor in Rajasthani language. And thereby pertaining to this very song, it is said that this song is really inspired the story of Dola Maru as well. And so with the folk tales of Dola Maru and that of Hadi Rani, we get to know how.
Kindly conclude.
Yes, I'm just concluding. So it says that these moral tales, these moralistic tales, they impart the vision of wisdom and profundity to the world outside, and thereby this is how the channels of performing arts like that of Kathputli tradition and vagaries, they add to the colors of the rich heritage of the state, and this is how it is meant to be preserved and cultivated all the more for the generations to receive and be accommodated with.
Thank you, Dr. Richa, for that wonderful presentation. We request Dr. Palabita Das, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Rabindranath Tagore University, Assam. Her presentation is on intangible cultural heritage of Sonowal Kachari of Assam, with special reference to Hogra dance. You have 5 minutes to present.
Yes, thank you, sir. It's a privilege to be here, to be a participant of this international conference. Sir, I would like to share my PPT only for showing my 2 photographs of Hogra dance. Apart from them, I would
Please
like to just, sir, just a minute. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Continue.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Okay. So actually, my paper is, as you have told already, that intangible cultural of Sonowal Kasaris of Assam with special reference to Hogra dance. So, culture symbolizes the identity of a nation and a community, and ICH is one of the primordial elements of identity formation of a community or sometime of a nation. So Assam is one of the state of Northeast India, and with its own beautiful ICH, and it's important from it is important from the perspective of history, religion, entertainment, and self-presentation. And as a part of ICH, performing art is a form of performance of dance and songs with traditional method, with some unique dress sense, unique method of presentation, and some lyrics they have actually sung and danced during the entire performance. So Sonowal Kasaris, as they were Aboriginal Plains tribe of Assam, they are scattered in the 7 districts of Upper Assam, and racially they belong to the Indo-Mongoloid group of people, and culturally, linguistically they belong to the Tibeto-Burmese group of people. And they have a large number of different kind of performing arts, and my paper is today only focusing the Hogra dance of this particular community. So Hogra dance, the narrative of the dance is that it is a story of performing a dance when King Hogra, he is hunting for a boar to sacrifice in front of the Baito. Baito is considered as Lord Shiva by the community, and before worshipping Baito, they have to sacrifice boar. And as we know, there is a myth regarding the story of Baito and murder of Asura king Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaka by Lord Vishnu. So as a revenge of this Sunwal Kasari people, they took revenge Lord Vishnu by this dance, and they kill boar or boar as a form of dancing element. So this Hogra dance is very, very important for this particular community, from the dressing style, from the tools they are using, the technology they are using, the tools mainly the fishing tools, then bows and arrows, and some agricultural tools they are using during the entire period or the dancing time. And they are hunting. The hunting, it is a time of entertainment. It is a time of entertainment. They are entertaining the audience, and the storyteller, they are telling the entire story of the people with the linkage of Lord Shiva and Vishnu. So this is the entire story of Hogra dance. And the challenges nowadays faced by the community, that because of the assimilation and acculturation of dominant culture, so there is a challenge of originality, the maintenance of originality. Then another problem is documentation, because they are very, very secret. They are very, very considered it as one of their secret dance. So they are never allowed it to perform in some other places. And also the new generation, they are not more interested than the negligences, and also lack of awareness, and the transmission of oral tradition. The transmission of oral tradition from the past generation to the new generation itself a challenge for the entire community. And therefore, I would like to suggest some points that for organizing workshop and training for the people to continue of this dance, and also allow some other people from other community to be a part of this particular program. That's why it can be generalized, and it can be learned by other people of the state, or as well as from the country. So in my concluding remark, I would like to say that ICH is considered as one of the living heritage, as a living heritage of a community or of a nation. So it should be preserved. And as we know that disappearance of this particular dance form or particular living heritage means disappearance of a community or the identity of a people. So as it is, as we know that the entire performing art give us a clear picture of their human evolution, the system of human evolution from Paleolithic to pastoralist, or their migration history, the assimilation and acculturation of the people from the entire past to the present time. So that's why this kind of dances or performing arts are one of the unique feature, or can be considered as one of the intangible cultural heritage, particularly for the community and as a whole for the country or the state. And that's all, sir. Thank you. Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes. That is well finished on time with the time discipline. Thank you very much, Dr. Das.
Yeah.
We move to next scholar, Dr. Savita Sukumar, Assistant Professor, Department of English, GM Women's College. And a paper is on ecological suicide of the Native American environment, a literary study. So, Dr. Sukumar, you have 5 minutes to begin your deliberation and complete as well.
Thank you very much, sir. A very warm good afternoon to all the panelists and the speakers for this Indigenous conference. As Dr. Jadhav sir has already mentioned, my topic is Ecological Suicide of the Native American Environment, a Literary Study. Now, like all the indigenous communities across the world, the Native Americans are considered to be one of the oldest settlers and the original settlers in America. They are also bestowed with the title of being the caretakers and the custodians of the American landscape. Now, it has been believed that the Native Americans came to America via the Bering Bridge, and then they stayed on there forever. Now, they brought with them their indigenous wisdom, knowledge, and also their cultural practices with which they coexisted in a very harmonious manner with the environment. Now, the American environment later on had become a much sought after, especially with the European invasion and also the colonialism. This invasion and colonialism, which are seen to be the twin edges of a sword, are actually said to have destroyed the Native American cultural practices that had enabled them to coexist peacefully with the environment and also with the land. Unfortunately, due to this colonialism and invasion, one observes that the Native American environment largely became to be abused, and they also became degraded and totally destroyed. Now, many of you must be wondering as to why am I particularly saying about Native American environment. It is not just the environment per se of the America or the Americans, but the Native Americans were being pushed into a place called as the reservation. They were living in reservation due to the policies of the government, and these reservation areas were totally secluded, isolated, and cut off from the mainstream American society. Not only that, the reservation areas also became a very a hot spot of contamination, toxic environmentalism, nuclear and radioactive waste, uranium tailings that were found in these kind of sites. These kind of environmental destruction and abuse were actually responsible for creating many physical and mental health problems in various Native American communities. At one point of time, there were almost 1 million tribes of Native Americans present, each with their own ethics of living and also their tribal chief with respect to their clans. But as the colonialism and the European invasion took place, many of these Native American communities dwindled, and today, by and large, we know them as Red Indians or American Indians or these Native Americans. So much so that there are only a few communities that are very much prominent, such as the Osage or the Cherokee, or for example, the Osage, and some of these or the Mohawk Indians, which are more popular in their in the literary landscape as well as we notice in the cultural landscape of America. Coming to the next point, as far as the literature is concerned, why am I tying both these topics together? The Native American literature has originally been an oral form of literature, and we observe that there have been a lot of oral narratives, songs, ceremonies, and there have a lot of folk stories that have been passed from one generation to another.
Sorry to interrupt. You have 1 minute left.
Sure, ma'am. And these have actually been part of their Native American literature. With the European invasion, we also observed that the many Native American children were forcefully sent to the boarding schools where they were Christianized and they were given English names, due to which they started slowly articulating themselves in English. And we observed that during the early 19th and the 20th century, Gertrude Simmons or Zipkala Sa is considered to be one of the earliest writers who started writing in Native American literature. In the 20th century, we have N. Scott Momaday, Leslie Marmon Silko, we we have Simon Otis, we have Jack Welch, we have Linda Hogan, Sherman Alexie. All of them are considered to be very significant and prominent writers, and they write about the inextricable bondage and the link between the Native American environment and the protagonists in their literature. Land is...
Your time is up.
Yeah, just I'm concluding it, ma'am. Land is inevitably and inherently tied to the Native American identity, especially, and it is reflected very strongly in literature. So the dislocation that is realized by the Native Americans is also realized in the literature as well. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Dr. Palabita, you are kindly requested to mute yourself. Sir, you're on mute.
Dr. Sukumar, thank you for your deliberation and quite well taken from the approaches you have managed to bring them. A good synthesis, rather. We will move to the next scholar, Shiba Hassan. Shiba Hassan is Assistant Professor, Department of Linguistics, University of Kashmir, and Shiba's presentation is on Murti ethnicity and their cliched representation in the mainstream Indian cinema. Shiba, you have 5 minutes to.
Okay. Okay, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, we can see your screen also.
Yeah.
You can make it on slideshow.
So a very good afternoon to all the presenters and the organizers of the conference. I'm Shiba Hassan from the Department of Linguistics. And the second presenter is Shahnawaz Bhatt, who is also in the meeting. The title of our paper is Gojri Ethnicity and Their Cliched Representation in a Mainstream Indian Cinema. Here in this paper, we are talking about how the media can play an important role in promotion and a presentation of the tribal groups. Okay, now to start with, first of all, cinema is the most prominent and effective medium for promotion and propagation of ideas. Dines and Humes in 2003 opines that media culture provides resources from which we build our identities, sense of selfhood, ethnicity, race, and nationality, sexuality, and notion of us and them. Cinema is the most effective medium for understanding and communicating social norms, attitudes, cultural adaptations, and behaviors to viewers because of its diversity and reach. According to Gupta and Gupta, 2013, movies have long served as an essential medium for communicating social ideas and circumstances, while also serving as a popular kind of entertainment for the general public. Bollywood, which controls a significant portion of an Indian film industry, focuses on Hindi language films. Furthermore, films are more in regional languages like Bhojpuri, Bengali, and Tamil, to mention a few. These films fare well locally, but due to language barriers, audiences are unable to traverse national borders. With the growing popularity of electronic media and the remarkable success of Bollywood among the Indian diaspora, it is crucial to investigate the representation of Gojri ethnicity in the Bollywood films. The media portrayal of nomadic people in India is extremely diverse. They paint all nomadic peoples as victims. Ganesh Devi in 2013 mentioned that representation of nomadic community are misrepresentations in media. In India, documentary filmmakers do the majority of media depiction of nomadic tribes. As per A. Lim and Rita Anand, nomadic tribes are frequently accused for big crimes, and their homes are frequently set ablaze by local villages or upper-class residents. They are subjected to psychological and physical assault. The most common themes in each media article on nomadic people, according to Mike Shannon, are portrayed pastoralists as victims of external problems. Quotes, Indian civil society organizations, right of nomadic people, empowerment, threats to survival, mobility of pastoralists, as having been marginalized by government. Conflicts cause problems for other communities and victims of problems. Cinema and the media hold a tremendous power in cultivating people's perception of identity, belonging, and the other. But Bollywood is uniquely powerful in this way. Raj Dayaksha and Vilman, and this permits special attention. Cliched representation of Indian cinema. Generally, following are the cliched representation of Kashmiri Muslims and the tribal post 1990s. Both the Kashmiris, I mean Kashmiri Muslims and the tribals which are living here, are used as set decorations and atmosphere for the film. If they are given a role, that would be either of terrorist or a shikarawala or a poniwala. Face with a long beard and a turban is usually casted as a furious terrorist.
Ma'am, I'm really sorry.
For tribal,
you have 1 minute left.
Okay, I'll come to the conclusion. I have just 2 slides now. For tribal community, they are not given even the space also. They are usually casted as poniwala or just tribal migrating in the background. Now, breaking this cliche, Laila or Satgeet is one of such film which has taken that risk. Laila or Satgeet is the first Gojri film with more than 90% of the cast from the tribal community, including the lead actor. First of all, the language. In the movie, language is dominantly in Gojri language with some mix of Pahari and Urdu. The Gojri language roots the film in the real tribal Gojar community, which are the native speakers of the Gojri and are fluent in Pahari and Urdu. The movie shows the trilingual nature of this community, where the characters are seen fluently switching from one language to another language. And when such interactions are captured in cinema, it brings prestige to the native community. The traditions. Gojar community is a shepherd community in general, and they migrate from time to time for better weather conditions throughout Jammu and Kashmir. The Gojar community is nomadic in nature, which believes in simple living and love nature and animals. These aspects have been... I'm coming to the conclusion, ma'am. So, the new generations who are getting more modernized feel a sense of pride in tradition of their community and begin wearing these traditional clothes which they might have shunned due to influence of modernity and popular cinema. The rituals and the songs. I would like to say the songs, there are 7 songs in this movie, all encompassing the 7 shades of love. Love is supposed to be of 7 shades: attraction, infatuation, love, reverence, worship, obsession, and death. So in this movie, what we have seen that the film uses these songs, and it has given a beautiful mesmerizing effect on the audience. Many times it has happened that when a mainstream film has used a local song, it has helped tremendously to that language in general and to the song in particular. Now coming to the conclusion, so media has a responsibility of representing the truth and avoiding the pitfalls of the false and pretentious glamorous world. The mainstream commercial cinema has always been a source of cliche and misrepresentation. It then becomes the duty of these independent films to show us the reality and the real picture. Films like Laila or Satgeet acts as a promoter of language and culture, and such movies should be watched, celebrated, and more such movies should be made so that the non-represented languages feel a sense of pride, a sense of value, and a sense of belongingness. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shiva. Thank you very much. May I ask you to kindly stop sharing your screen so we can move further? Yeah. We have our next caller, Dr. Sunaina Jain, Assistant Professor. Department of English, Meher Chand Mahajan DAV College for Women, Chandigarh. And Dr. Sunaina Jain will be giving us her insights on representation of Native Americans, a study of selected fictional works of Alice Walker. Dr. Sunaina Jain, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. First of all, my warm greetings to the organizers and all the participants here. And kindly excuse me because I have to sit in the car because of network connectivity issues. I have to sit in the car and give this presentation, so I'm sorry for that. Yes, I am going to talk on the topic Representation of Native Americans, a study of selected works of Alice Walker. And as another scholar has already discussed who Native Americans were, they were the indigenous peoples of America. So I'm not going to repeat this. And I would go further. I want to make a point here that when Europeans, they started massive scale colonization of the Native Americans from the 15th century onwards, their target was to obliterate their cultures, their beliefs, language, their history. And for this, they resorted to all sorts of trickery, genocide, removal, displacement, dislocation, and slavery. So these people, the story of these people, indigenous people, as well as, because I am going to talk about Black Indians, the mixed race people also. So they also bore the brunt of this colonization, and theirs has been a story of stolen land, sickness, suffering, starvation, and sadness. And Europeans, they brought with them a lot of unseen pathogens, and that decreased the population of Native Americans in America. So these were some of the tactics they employed to sort of decimate Native Americans. And you can see the pictures here. These are the pictures of sickness and suffering, and the kind of diseases which they brought along. And a lot of the concern for the rights of indigenous peoples and respect for their way of life is palpable in a lot of Native American writers' writings, like Louis Edridge, Sherman Alexie, Leslie Marmon Silko. But apart from that, many writers of European descent as well as mixed descent. By mixed descent, I would refer to mixed genealogy of certain writers. For example, the writer I've chosen here is Alice Walker, and she's a triracial. She's an African American, she's a Native American, and she also has some Scotch-Irish part in her blood. So there has been, these writers have, from time to time, they've challenged this kind of marginalization of these indigenous peoples. And Alice Walker has been at the forefront of a lot of demonstrations, campaigns. She became involved in the American Indian movement. She read poetry with a lot of Native American writers. She hosted fundraisers. She joined demonstrations for Native American rights. These are just a few examples, because Alice Walker has been a very, very active proponent of Native American rights, of African American rights. Now, the concerns and questions in this paper, Alice Walker's treatment of indigenous rights and spirituality. How can these indigenous tribes contribute towards restoration of ecological balance of fragile earth? Are there feminist and ecological lessons to be learned from Native Americans or Black Indians? And how are Western hegemonic discourses and practices fetishizing or commodifying the traditional practices and rituals of indigenous tribes? And do Native Americans create convergence between the supposedly polarizing concepts of spirituality and sexuality? So these are some of the questions which I've addressed in the paper, but owing to time constraint, I will not be able to delve deep into these issues. Now, what are the beliefs of Native Americans? Alice Walker writes, I quote, "No one has better appreciated Earth than the Native American. Everything to the Indian was a relative. Everything was a human being." And this has been taken from her book, Living by the Word. And the underlying belief, this is the crux of the paper, that the underlying ontology is the recognition of an interconnected web, an interconnected matrix of life in which plants, animals, humans, earth, cosmos, they do not exist in hierarchical, pyramid. Rather, they coexist as members of the whole. And this viewpoint, the standpoint of Alice Walker has been, showcased, has been exhibited by her in many of her collections, in many of her writings, whether it is fiction, non-fiction, poetry. Absolute Trust in the Goodness of Earth is a poetry collection in which she shows her reverence for a Native American woman, Maria Sabina, and there's a poem dedicated to her. And there is another poem in this collection, A Native American Looks Up to the Plate, which showcases, which represents the plight of these people and how the lands have been stolen from them, how they have been just pushed to the fringes, pushed to the reservation areas. And in an essay, In the Cushion in the Road, another work collection of
Ma'am,
essays.
requesting you to kindly start concluding.
All right. So Alice Walker has been talking about these intersected lives, fluidity of cultures, and belief in spiritualized sexuality. For indigenous people, sexuality is not to be separated from body. Corporeality and body are not sins, are not evil, as they are supposedly, believed to be in as per the Christian upbringing, Christian conservative notions of sin and evil. So Walker, through her writing, she foregrounds her love for earth-based spirituality, and she touches upon feminist as well as environmental issues. And in her novels like Meridian, like By the Light of My Father's Smile, she, she is again challenging, she is foregrounding the concerns of Native Americans. And though she's primarily an African American, she holds these Native Americans and their rights, their concerns very close to her heart. And one thing which I want to, just say before conclusion is that veneration for ancestors, I would not talk about the novel here, but yes, these Native American tribes, they have deep reverence for land as well as their ancestors. So these are some of the beliefs which they believe in, and Alice Walker's writings reflects her awareness of this unbroken chain of ancestors by writing from all parts of her identity, whether it is African American, whether it is Native American. So this is how this is what she brings through in her writings. Thank you.
Dr. Sunaina, thank you very much. Despite all the adverse conditions, you managed to still log on and you managed to connect with us. So quite happy that you could make it.
Thank you, sir.
We move on to our next caller. I'll just take over the turn, because if Ranu Chari is there, is Ranu Chari there? Okay, she is supposed to be part of the cultural event as well. Okay. We have Dr. Ashwathi from MES KVM College, Malappuram, Kerala, and she'll be giving her presentation on Apocalypto, a tale of Mayan's quest for survival. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so be here. As sir said, my title of my topic is Apocalypto, a tale of Mayan quest for survival. As we know that Mayans are indigenous people in Mesoamerica, and they have a different culture, history, and political identity. And it is believed that they believed in some part of Mexico, Guatemala, Yucatan Peninsula, El Salvador, and Honduras. And they were very skilled in astrology, astronomy, mathematics, and architecture, as we have seen in the remnants of Mayan civilization. So here I have a movie called Apocalypto, released in 2006, directed and produced by Mel Gibson. It gives us a panorama of Mayan civilization and how the people lived in that particular age. And we have the hero, Jagulpo, a Mayan who lives in the forest in Middle America, and how his village is set burned by Mayan warriors, and how he and his community members were taken as captives to the city of Mayan rulers. And it is very astonishing to see that the very beautiful architectural structure of the Mayan city, the very well-structured civilization in that city, the life of the people, especially the all class of people like upper class, lower class, even rich and poor, and the social system, government system, everything very beautifully depicted in that picture, in that particular scene and all. And Jagulpo, along with this group members, were taken as captive, and they were taken to the city for human sacrifice, because the paper actually analyzes some of the religious practices exercised by Mayan rulers. Because in order to retain their dynasty, they have to practice these kinds of ritual in order to appease gods, to recover from famine and drought. So these captives were taken for human sacrifice. And it is when we look into the history, I mean the Mayan civilization, there were many temples and buildings in which we can see these kinds of stela, in which these human sacrifices and everything has been engraved on the walls of the temples in that Mayan city, in Mayan civilization, or in that particular era. Then what happens is that Jagar Po anyhow tries to escape from this human sacrifice, and he finally reunites with this family. And at the end of the movie also we see how the Spaniards arrive on the land, on their land, and it is also the beginning of a new war. So it is, the movie indicates that it is the new beginning of a new revolt or war, because the Spaniards has arrived on their land. And it is believed that Mayan civilization had begun to decline after the Spanish invention, and also due to some epidemic diseases and all. So here, this movie is definitely a very wonderful feast for all the movie lovers who are interested in indigenous culture like Mayan civilization. And the movie has got some criticism that Mel Gibson had been criticized that he had distorted some of the rituals in as exercised by Mayan rulers, as depicted as bloodthirsty, very devilish and brutal. But anyway, we'll get a very idea, I mean, a beautiful picture of Mayan city civilization and the life and community, how the people, their appearance, everything is there. It's a very wonderful feast for all movie lovers. I suggest all of you would watch this movie, and thank you all of you. Thank you.
Dr. Ashwati, very good, and I think you managed to maintain the time discipline also, because sometimes we have so much data and assimilation of information that we do not know how to make it objective, but quite happy to see that way. We have Suraj Das now, Senior Research Fellow from Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, Roorkee. Customs and Dietary Shift, Understanding the Dynamics of Food Choices in the Western Himalayan Region. A very interesting topic and title. Suraj, you have 5 minutes.
For introducing me. First of all, good afternoon to everyone. I hope everyone is doing fine on the other side. Myself, Suraj from IIT Roorkee. So today I will be presenting my paper, and the title is Custom and the Dietary Shift, understanding the dynamics of food choices in the Western Himalayan region. So before proceeding further, let me introduce what my research work is all about. So there are lots of studies that has been conducted from the perspective like what is the impact of food choices on the climate change. But the other way around is missing, that is, what is the impact of climate change on the traditional food choices? So therefore, for the present study, here I'm trying to explore and document the changes brought by the climate change on the traditional dietary food habits, and further on the socio-cultural norms of the population of the people, indigenous people living in the Western Himalayan region, that is in Uttarakhand. So for that matter, I have conducted the 32 in-depth interviews, and from the 32 in-depth qualitative interviews, I have concluded here, like based on the grounded theory, I have concluded that due to climate change, there are shifts in their traditional dietary habits, and because of that, their socio-cultural norms are also changing. For example, I have found an interesting thing. The people in Uttarakhand usually celebrate Harela, a festival, and Bara Anaj. So in Harela, there is also a customary norm of Bhitoli, where they usually give some kind of stuff to their beloved daughters. But due to delay in the seasonal changes, they are not doing that. And apart from that, there is also other thing called Bara Anaj, where they usually grow 12 types of crop. But due to the same reason, due to climate change, they are not following the same rituals like they used to, as they used to grow the 12 types of crop, but they are not growing the same because of the unfavorable climatic conditions. And besides that, there was also an interesting thing like Kala Bhat. There is an example of black soybean, that is Kala Bhat, they call it locally. So there is also a gender dimension here. They usually serve Kala Bhat to the female because they consider Kala Bhat as inferior in quality. So at the time of climatic variability, and it's a mostly female who suffers. So in conclusion, I can say in conclusion we can say that the issue of food insecurity is there, but it can be handled with the integration of locally grown or the traditionally consumed food habits. So this is it. Thank you.
Suraj, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Quite happy that, generally it is observed that people who are from engineering and technical background do not have much of interest in social sciences. But
Right.
quite happy that you're managing to bridge that gap here.
Thank you so much, sir.
Again, welcome. We have next scholar, Abhira Bhattacharya, who is assistant curator, anthropology department, National Museum. And it is a joint paper, I think, if I'm not wrong. Abhira, am I correct? Hello? Abhira, are you with us? Hello? I think it is a joint paper between Abhira Bhattacharya, Dr. Samma Haq, and Mridusmita. Hello?
Hello. Hello, sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I think it is a joint paper between you
Yeah.
and two other scholars.
Yes, so it's a joint paper. It's based on a project which we are working on currently. Thank you so
Here
much
you
for
have 5
introducing
minutes.
us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for introducing us, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present our paper, which is based on an ongoing project from the anthropology department. I will be sharing my presentation. So the title of this presentation is Curating Indigenous Voices of War and Heroism, Reinterpreting the Northeast Collection at the National Museum, New Delhi. So just to begin with, as we know, National Museum Delhi was built in 1960, and based on an exhibition and there are like 11 departments in National Museum. Anthropology department is one of them, which handles the ethnographic collection, which had been collected through various mediums. And the major collection of the anthropology department comprises of Dr. Veeral Elwin and Leela Elwin collection. Then we have Luthra collection, B.S. Guha, amongst all. And this entire acquisition had been done from 1960 to 2001. So in the present day, we have two galleries dedicated to the anthropology collection. One is Tribal Lifestyle of Northeast India and the Sharanani Bakliwal Gallery of Musical Instruments. The collection comprises of 9,000 objects. So like in the anthropology department, by the help of this collection, we have tried to develop a model for like we have categorized the entire model into 4 categories, in which the first approach is audience centric approach, in which we have done temporary exhibitions, interactive workshops, and we also developed some we collaborated with one of the app called Hop on India, in which there were QR codes, and then also audio and video guide were done. Then the second is the virtual initiative during the pandemic. So as we all know, the pandemic posed many challenges, especially to the museum field. So we tried reaching to the people through the social media platform, and we had like the education department and the anthropology department. Them are tagged like if you just see Instagram and our social media handle, you will find Be the Community tag. You will also find virtual walkthroughs, museum in 11 minutes, and etc. And then the third is community engagement program, which like these programs were done before the pandemic time, in which we actually called artisans and various artists who came to National Museum, and they all did different kind of interactive and demonstrative sessions. Some of them were like, some of them are listed here, like based on the Himachali jewelry. Then on the Himachali intangible cultural heritage also we did some programs. Then also on Bengal folk art. And then the last is reinterpreting the intangible cultural heritage of the communities, which is more like a research-based and documentation-based project. So based on this, we are redeveloping the existing gallery of the Northeast collection in the museum. And we are creating a separate section in the upcoming museum section in the Red Fort Barrack, which will focus only on the untold stories of the warriors of the ethnic communities of the Northeast. And the storyline, it will cover the lost identity and significance of the warriors, their hierarchical order in the society, religious and social belief patterns. And we have chosen some of the communities from Arunachal, from Nagaland and Mizoram, which are already existing in our collection.
Abhira, may I ask you to take your concluding lines, please?
The third is like...
Abhira,
so,
may I ask you to take concluding lines, please?
So, if I just show you the glimpse of the collection, so these are the various categorization, the revisiting of the headhunting tradition, arming the warrior and weaving identity and tradition, ritual objects and mortuary rites. So these are the objects, just to show you the glimpse. So these are the part of the collection which we are going to showcase in the whole exhibition. And maybe by the end of this year, this exhibition will be open for the public. So as we all know about the ICOM definition, which addresses for like the inclusivity and the heritage of all. And just to conclude, we all know that inclusivity is like through the representation of the anthropological collection, we can also develop awareness about the inclusivity, and also we can bridge the gaps between the historicity, because the living tradition is also a part of the historical era, which is continuous and which is developing, and also some of the sections are getting lost in this whole space of time and zone. So we are trying to revive these traditions, and we are trying to showcase them through this upcoming exhibition.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abhira and the team for this fascinating presentation. Of course, I guess most of us are looking forward to visit this display of yours in the National Museum in the due course. And National Museum has always been a pioneer in many of these experiments, and quite glad to see most of you are also trying to display something which is otherwise is losing its stature as such. Thank you very much, Abhira and team, for being with us in National Museum. We move to our next scholar, Abhirami, who is from Sanatan Dharma College, and her topic is, Abhirami, are you there? Yeah. The topic is Anthropocene and COVID, the forlorn life of tribes in Kerala.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, sir, for introducing me, and a warm good afternoon to one and all. So my paper is Anthropocene and COVID, the forlorn life of tribes in Kerala. So I'm talking about the indigenous people in the southern Indian state of Kerala, and commonly they are called as Adivasis. And according to the census report of 2001 and 2011, the population of some of these tribes are declining. Paniyar, Chola Naikar, Kattu Naikar, Kuruchiyar. These are some of the most commonly found tribes in Kerala, and they are found in the districts Wayanad, Palakkad, and Idukki. The word Adivasi has its origin in Sanskrit, meaning the first inhabitants, and their cultural practice, religious beliefs, eating habits, and even their traditional dressing styles are eco-friendly. And they are actually very much different from that of the people in the mainstream society, the modernized people in the mainstream society. But in the eyes of these modernized man, Adivasi has already become the primitives of Kerala, and their eco-friendly culture is now only considered as the low culture. Today, we are all living in the anthropogenic world. Anthropocene is the unofficial epoch during which man has already acquired the status of a dominant geological force. And this epoch marks the dominance of the species known as Homo sapiens, and also the destruction of nature. And in this epoch, so as I already told, that man is the center of universe and he is exploiting the nature to upgrade his living condition. But as a result of these anthropogenic activity, eventually Earth will become unfit for the man to live on. As man is not an interplanetary species, the chances of extinction are high. But still, in the eyes of these modernized man, the Adivasis, whose life and lifestyle are inseparable from that of nature, is only having the status of a low caste, and they are actually seen as the exotic other. And today, there is a strong evidence that the anthropogenic changes have led to the diseases like malaria, lung syndrome, Nipah virus, and Ebola virus. In case of novel coronavirus, which was first identified in Wuhan also, the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention has confirmed that the virus causing outbreak of COVID-19 in Wuhan came from the wild animals, whose meats were sold in the market. The first group of patients in Wuhan were mostly the traders of that market. So we can actually confirm that this pandemic is a paradigmatic example of anthropogenic disease. COVID struck Kerala in January 2020, and from March, the state was undergoing curfew. Educational institutions were closed. The working hours of government and private organization or offices were reduced, and there was high restrictions on transportation. And this was actually one of the most crucial time in the history of mankind, that many of us has lost our jobs, and mass immigration was reported, and also whole world was in the state of panic. But sir, shall I continue?
No, you can. Yeah, please conclude your session.
Okay. So as a conclusion, I would like to tell that it is very necessary to preserve these tribal communities and their eco-friendly culture. If human beings are still continuing with these anthropogenic activities, the slow changes in the environment will definitely get accelerated. And the tsunamis, floods, and also the forest fires are an example of the anthropogenic the slow changes in the environment will actually get accelerated due to these anthropogenic activities. So it is very essential to follow the eco-friendly life. Nature must be the center of universe instead of man being the center of universe. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Abhirami. I like the jest and enthusiasm with which you presented. Quite well. We have our last speaker for the day, Salia Rex. Salia Rex, are you there with us?
I'm here, sir.
Rex, yes, is Assistant Professor of English, St. Paul's College, Kerala, and her presentation is on Nadu Gadhika, a realistic portrait of the indigenous people of Wayanad. You have 5 minutes to present.
Yes, sir. A warm good evening to respected organizers and dear presenters. The title of my paper is Nadu Gadhika, a realistic portrait of the indigenous people of Wayanad. The study intends to present the text Nadu Gadhika, written in 1983, as a mirror held against the Adia tribes in Wayanad in order to reveal their ethnic rituals, language, customs, folklores, and pathetic conditions as indigenous tribals of Wayanad, who suffer under the oppression of a series of power structures over the progression of time. The intention is to underscore the artistic attempts of the author, K.J. Baby, a renowned novelist, playwright, activist, and filmmaker from Kerala, who works selflessly for the empowerment of the Adia community in the Wayanad district in Kerala. His area of focus is the Adia tribal community in the Wayanad district, and his attempt is to liberate the community through the medium of street plays, enacted to sensitize the tribal community. The term Nadu Gadiga is a regional term that signifies the customary act of fumigation that is done by the Adia communities to cleanse, to purify their dwelling places, people, and community. Once the author, KG Baby, happened to witness an elderly tribal performing the act of fumigation, which inspired him to write a literary work to sensitize the tribals about their lifelong exploitation and injustice. The play portrays the pathetic lament of Adia tribes who were relegated to the fringes of the society by the various agencies of power at various periods of time, right from the prehistoric time when Maveli Manmatheyam, their legendary progenitor, lived. The characters of the play Nadu Gadiga are not mere individuals, but representatives of a category of people in the community. Yajan is the old and worn-out tribal who had spent all the good times of his life for the masters. He represents the helpless tribal community who are afraid to speak the truth, even though he plays the role as the servant to his master. Belli, his blind son, is a symbol of penury and deprivation, who reminds the society of his peril through his refrain, Paikindo, which exposes the poignant condition of the starved. He depicts voice of thousands of tribals all over India who are dying on a daily basis due to deprivation and exploitation. The third son, Lakshmana, is a symbol for the exploitative and the nonchalant attitude of the educated people in the society who are often indifferent towards injustice in the society. Here we find how the characters are representing each social classes in the society. The Tamburan, or the landlord, is a tyrant or a universal fixture who employs religion and religious idols as a means to subjugate the slaves. The slaves were made to believe that there were slaves forever, even after their death. In the play, Gadigakaran acts as the spokesperson of the Oda, who performs the ritual Nadu Gadiga and presents the detailed history of the tribals up to the present period. The ritual Nadu Gadiga in the play is metaphorically used to make the tribals aware of their exploitation at the hands of their landlord, Tamburan. Gadigakaran narrates incidents in their life that account for their present predicament. He sensitizes the tribals about the dubious dealings and ulterior motives of the landlord Tamburan, who wants to overrule the tribals. The playwright therefore tears the hypocrisy of Tamburan, who takes sides with the Britishers during the pre-independent period with the ruling political parties after the independence. Towards the end of the play, the Adiyas realize the evil identity of Tamburan as the community questions him and make him answerable for the age-long oppression he had done to the Adiyas as they cast out Tamburan from their lives. Nadu Gadiga faithfully represents the life of Adiyas, giving voice for them to speak back to the powers that exploited them. In all aspects, the play therefore depicts the Adiya community of Wayanad as an empowered community which breaks the shackles of oppression and is en route to liberation thanks to the educational reforms of the government and the humanistic approach of the people towards the indigenous people who have to still go a long way forward to be a liberated community. Thank you so much. I conclude my presentation.
Thank you very much, Salia Rex, for that wonderful, crispy presentation, rather. Looking forward. So, to all the dear participants, we here come to an end with our parallel technical session 4. We will be uploading this as well on the YouTube. You can access it after we upload it. I invite you, all of you, to kindly join us on YouTube Live. We have fabulous cultural events happening there. So in today's session, we had presentation from Richa Bora from Jodhpur, Dr. Palabita Das from Assam, Then we had Dr. Savita Sukumar from Kerala. We had Shiva Hassan from Kashmir. We had Sunaina Jain from Chandigarh. We had Dr. Ashwati from Kerala, Suraj Das from Roorkee. We had Abhira and the team joined us all the way from National Museum, New Delhi. We had Abhirami and Salia Rex from Kerala as such. So all the presenters, good wishes. Thank you for being part of this entire deliberation and looking forward to have more interaction with you in due course. Thank you once again.
So good evening. Could I just